Risotto has got to be one of my favorite rice dishes. It's hearty, versatile, and super delicious if done right. You can make a base risotto in advance and tweak the flavors to suit your mood for the day. Even better, you can take the leftovers and turn it into a whole other dish which is equally as delicious. So in today's video, I show you how I make mushroom risotto. Before we begin, you need to remember one thing. Unlike everything you've learned in school, risotto isn't something you can just set and forget. It requires some good old TLC. Leave the rice stagnant for too long and it'll catch to the bottom of your pan and burn. If you don't stir it enough, you won't get a creamy final product, but if you overcook it or overwork it, you may end up with rice pudding or porridge. Nonetheless, it's a dish that will help you improve as a chef or a home cook, and it's well worth the effort. With that being said, let's start cooking. Start by heating up your stock. Beef or chicken will work just fine. If you're going for a seafood risotto, you can use a seafood stock, and if you're going for a vegetarian or vegan alternative, then just use vegetable stock. Here, I'm using a homemade chicken stock and infusing it with some dehydrated mushrooms. If you want to know how I made these, I'll link it somewhere in the video or in the description. I usually bring my stock to a simmer, take it off the heat and just leave it. Next, finely dice an onion and 2 cloves of garlic. If you have access to shallots or white onions, you can use those as well. Now grab your mushrooms and slice them into fairly thick slices. The reason why we aren't slicing them too thinly is because they will wilt down once cooked and we still want some texture in the dish. Optional, you can quarter some of the mushrooms, cook them off and use them as garnish for later. Pro tip. Contrary to popular belief, you can actually wash your mushrooms. Yes, they will absorb a little bit of water, but the amount is negligible. Also, once you start cooking them, most of the water will be released and will be evaporated over time. I don't know about you, but I would rather spend an extra minute cooking my mushrooms rather than having a mouthful of dirt. Now place a pan over medium-high heat and toss in your mushrooms. You can put a little bit of oil, but it's not super necessary. Season them with a little bit of salt and pepper and sweat the mushrooms. This should take about 5 to 7 minutes. Now the mushrooms will release quite a bit of water, but once all that's evaporated, they'll start to brown and develop flavor. As for the quartered mushrooms, I did the exact same thing, except I tossed in a bit of the chopped onions towards the end, deglazed the pan with some Worcester sauce as well as balsamic vinegar.
A little bit of Worcester sauce.
Given that risotto can be quite a rich dish, having something tart serves nicely to provide some contrast and to cut through the richness. Now let's move on to the risotto. Place another pan over medium heat, toss in a knob of butter as well as some olive oil. Once it's melted, toss in your onions and cook them until they're slightly translucent, about 3 to 5 minutes. Then, in with the garlic right at the end for about 30 seconds to prevent them from burning. Now, turn up the heat to high and toss in your rice. Here, I'm using Arborio Rice, but any short grain variety will actually still work. Now cook the rice for about a minute or until it turns slightly translucent. I find that 100 grams of raw rice is a good portion size for a singular person. Pour in a splash of white wine and cook off the alcohol. This step is optional, but it does improve the overall flavor of the dish. Once that's cooked off, turn your heat down to medium, pour in your stock and start stirring. The exact amount of stock to add is debatable, but I find about 2 to 3 ladles is a good starting point. As long as you're gradually adding in the stock and not pouring it all at once, you should be fine. Stir the rice as the stock slowly evaporates. This agitation is crucial for the rice to release its starch and to make the final product rich and creamy. Once the stock has been mostly evaporated, pour in a bit more stock and repeat the process. Remember to stir the corners of your pan so that you don't get any rice sticking to it and burning. Now risotto is something you'll need to get a feel for, so remember to taste frequently. About 5 to 7 minutes in, your rice should start getting a little bit tender but still have a decent amount of bite. Toss in a handful of mushrooms, add a little more stock and keep stirring. At about the 15-minute mark, your grains of rice should be tender with a little bit of bite in the middle. If you know what al dente pasta should feel like, it's not too different from that. The dish should be custardy and luxurious with a nice sheen to it. At this point, take it off the heat, toss in a knob of cold butter, grate some fresh Parmesan and mix. If you feel your risotto should be a little bit runnier, you can add a few spoonfuls of the stock to thin it down. All that's left is to plate it up and you are done. I added some fried enoki mushrooms for additional texture and umami, but you do you. And there you have it, how to make a mushroom risotto. The base recipe for risotto is more or less the same. You basically cook that and adjust the flavors accordingly. Some flavors you can experiment with would include saffron, seafood, any tomato-based sauce, except ketchup, please don't put that inside. Other vegetables such as peas, even asparagus would work. The list goes on. Now of course all of these have their little nuances, but that's for another time, because that's all for today. If you enjoyed the video or learned something new, hit that like button, share the video, and consider subscribing. Also, remember to turn on notifications so you don't miss a beat. But for now, I'll say thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.